Well, Nick, thanks for being with us today, and thanks for your support of the Ag Startup Engine.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, well, let's start out with you telling us a little bit about yourself, Nick.
Oh, great. Well, I'm Iowa born and raised. Grew up in a little town called Hudson, just south of here. My dad was a banker, and that was an ag community. So I grew up around the agriculture. A lot of my friends were farm kids, and unfortunately, I grew up as the farm crisis started, and my dad had to liquidate a lot of farmers back in the early '80s, and so I was exposed to that pain and a lot of that misfortune. And I used to help him at all the auctions, the farm auctions, and I would run the sale sheets around, and sometimes I would get to write down the bidder and the price and all that kind of stuff. So I was around agriculture quite a bit early in my life.
So when did you decide that being in banking might be for you?
Well, the plan was to be in banking.
Okay.
So I went to UNI. I was a finance major. Was looking at schooling after UNI to advance the banking knowledge. There was a place for me at the bank in Hudson as I graduated. And the farm crisis was in full swing by the time I graduated from UNI in 1984. And my dad came to me and said, there's no place now in the bank. The bank might not even be around to survive the farm crisis. So I switched gears and I moved to Atlanta, and I actually became a commodities broker.
Oh.
So I actually got my Series 3 in college and was starting to help a broker do seminars for farmers on how to hedge. And things like that. So again,
this would be back in the PIC program days.
So back in so that was just a different kind of aspect to agriculture and hedging and commodities and things like that. And so when I moved to Atlanta, I did the same thing. I got on with a brokerage company in Atlanta and continued to help farmers, just in a different part of the country. And instead of corn and soybeans, it was cotton and frozen orange juice and things like that.
So what was that like as a young person to move to a different part of the country, for sure, but a different part of agriculture as well?
Well, it was interesting, and as I called on farmers in South Georgia and Florida and Alabama, they could tell I wasn't from there. So I learned a lot of things really quick, and I came home to Iowa one day, and my mom asked me where I got that accent. And I said, well, I kind of have to have it. So,
you had to lose
so
your
I had to
Yankee
practice
thing.
it. Yeah. So in order for people to buy into what I was selling, I had to adjust accordingly with my drawl, so to speak. So, yeah. So that was so I have an early ag upbringing, even though we weren't farmers. My grandfather was a farmer. Both grandfathers were farmers. I spent a lot of time on my granddad's farm and spent a week there every summer growing up, and so got to help him take livestock to the auction barn and things like that. So been around agriculture almost all my life. There's been some lags there, but so that's where I get all this interest.
So what brought you back to Iowa?
Good question. So we were gone about eight and a half years, and my wife's from here. I'm from here. We had a child. We were living in a big metropolitan area that had a lot of it was just rapidly changing. It was South Florida, and we decided that to raise our children and to do what we wanted to do the way we wanted to do it, Iowa was probably a better choice. And at the time, I was working for a company based in Iowa. So living in South Florida, working for an Iowa-based company, and they actually asked me to come back and start their marketing department. So it worked out really well because it happened to be home. It happened to be here where we grew up. So
got the chance to build something as well.
Yeah, so that worked out really well. So then the story goes that I worked at that company for 19 years and had stock options, and had kind of reached a point where I wanted to know what was next in my life, and I cashed in my stock options and bought a company, ironically, in Hudson where I grew up. And that company manufactured products for the veterinary market, especially large animal veterinary. So here I was back in agriculture per se, manufacturing products for veterinarians who served farmers. And so I would jump in the truck with some of the Hudson veterinarians every now and then, and we'd go out and they would show me what palpating a horse was like, and going to work the feed lot with all the cattle and things like that. So got reacclimated, but really a nice education with riding around with the large animal vets around this part of Iowa. So
How long did you do that?
so I bought Portavet in 2005,
Ah.
and I did that for only about 3 years, and then again we had a large economic downturn.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, our competitor came to us, also based in Iowa.
Mhm.
So the only two companies in the entire world making large animal veterinary units, mobile units, they came to me and asked me if I would have wanted to sell the company, and so we worked out a deal. So I sold my company. So that was 2008. I worked for them for another year or so, and after that, that's when I found this job. They decided to close the Hudson facility
Mm-hmm.
and move everything to their other location, and so then I was looking for a new job, and that's how I landed here at Veridian Credit Union back in 2009. So,
Well, quite a career shift from, moving to a different part of the country to moving back to Iowa to build somebody else's business and then building your own and having the experience of selling that and watching it be merged, which
Yeah.
is always interesting.
very interesting. And those are some of the highlights in some of the interesting things I've seen
Yeah.
in my business career
Yeah.
is buying companies, selling companies, seeing things happen
Mhm.
with the economy
Mhm.
more than once.
External factors can be big.
Exactly, exactly. And all those experiences helped me build who I am today and helped me get this job here, because part of the things that Veridian was looking for when this position was open was someone who was entrepreneurial,
Mhm.
someone who had bought and sold companies, had that experience, and someone that was akin to looking for new things within an existing industry.
Yeah.
And so I actually found this ad in the newspaper, believe it or not, back in 2009, and answered it, and I was lucky. I landed on my feet here at Veridian. So and
Yeah.
that's how we got here today.
And now on the other side of the table from the entrepreneur, being the lending organization and being an investor.
Yes, right. And my role here doesn't, I really don't have much to do on the traditional banking side of things.
Mhm.
My role here at Veridian is really more of the venture side.
Mhm.
Iowa Credit Unions, we're a state chartered
Mhm.
credit union in Iowa, and we have a little known piece of statute that says that an Iowa-based credit union, state chartered Iowa-based credit union, can take equity positions in Iowa-based companies or Iowa-based venture capital funds.
Okay.
And so we're only one of 2 states that allow that
Oh,
in the
fantastic.
credit union code.
Yeah.
And so I manage that piece
Mhm.
for the credit union, and we're today in, I think, 4 venture capital funds, and we have some direct investments. We can also invest directly in companies outside of Iowa if they're in the financial sector,
Mm.
if they're a fintech.
Sure.
And so we've done some of that as well. So, but the Ag Startup Engine falls under that category of a venture capital fund
Mhm.
based in Iowa, investing in Iowa companies. So
Great.
that's why we like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, give us a little bit of the history of Veridian Credit Union, because it ties back obviously into agriculture as well. And I think
absolutely.
it's an interesting story.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we were interested in, when the concept of the Ag Startup Engine was presented to us, our history is the reason that we even agreed to take the meeting, because in 1934, this credit union was founded by 5 employees in the John Deere manufacturing facility. And obviously we all know who John Deere was and
Mhm.
what John Deere's history is, and the fact that they are making a lot of big green tractors today and have been since the 1800s. And so in 1934, the Veridian Credit Union was started around the premise that John Deere tractor manufacturing employees could join this credit union. And credit union's philosophy is people helping people. In other words, credit union members pool their money in order to loan the money to other credit union members.
Yeah.
And so here we are in 2019, and we've grown from the John Deere employee factory setting to today what we call a community-based charter. And that all centered back to the farm crisis back in the early 80s, because the powers that be at the credit union saw thousands of John Deere employees lose their jobs virtually overnight. I want to say 6,000 employees were laid off in a very short time period in the 80s. They were all factory employees.
It's just dark days.
Dark days of the
all
farm
over.
crisis, yeah. And so the powers that be at the credit union said, wow, this is really going to impact us. How do we look and have a broader look, or have a broader scope with helping people? Not only all those folks that are laid off, but all the employees that are still working. And so our charter was expanded to not only employees, but family members of employees,
Mm-hmm.
people that worked in this county, people that worshiped in this county, things like that. And it started in Blackhawk County, and then expanded to the 5 contiguous counties around Waterloo, and then from there, today we serve 99 counties in Iowa and 6 counties in Nebraska. But,
Fantastic.
but the agricultural roots run deep from the fact that we were a John Deere employee, started credit union. And at the time, I believe, at one time there were 5 credit unions centered around John Deere manufacturing facilities. And then in 2004, John Deere came to all of us, and we weren't associated. We were independent from John Deere employees in Dubuque, John Deere employees in Ankeny, John Deere employees credit union in Ottumwa, John Deere in Waterloo. We were all independent, even though we had similar names. And John Deere came to us in 2004 and said, we would like you to change your name from a brand perspective. There's risk. And so if you don't manufacture green tractors, we would like you to change your name. And we did. And we still have a very close working relationship with the employees in the Waterloo and Cedar Falls based facilities. And we merged with the credit union in Ankeny, so we have great relationships with the John Deere manufacturing employees in Ankeny and Des Moines and everywhere, really.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, Deere itself is a whole story of agricultural technology, dating back to the moldboard plow to modern mechanization and precision agriculture today. So what we invest in at the Ag Startup Engine broadly, at least, is agricultural technology. So you've seen a lot.
Yes.
Not only Ag Startup Engine, but in other places. As you think about where opportunities are at in agricultural technology, where do you think they're most compelling from your perspective?
It's most compelling, I think, from the shortage of employees or people that can help the farmers do what they do.
So labor is
labor is a huge thing. So anything technologically that can affect being more efficient, helping with the labor shortage, and the fact that the global population on this globe is growing, it's expanding, and we have to produce more food. And we're sitting in the middle of the breadbasket here in basically the world. And so efficiencies around how do we get more out of every acre of land and things like that. So I think ag tech around efficiency and the employee shortage will be where I see the biggest opportunities. So I just think that that's the fun part of seeing what the Ag Startup Engine is helping, bring forward and bring to the market. That's exciting. So.
What do you think some of the biggest challenges are facing agricultural technology, whether it's the entrepreneurs trying to do it or just kind of affecting the adoption or whatever?
Well, you said the key word. I feel the biggest challenge for these young entrepreneurs is going to be convincing the farmers to adopt the technology. I mean, I think you might know this fact. I don't know, but I have a good guess. What's the average age of the farmer that's actually getting dirt under their nails today?
I think it's 58.
58. So you get the idea. So I believe adoption is the biggest challenge that they'll face when they go out to the farm and try to get the the producers to utilize the technology, be it a livestock producer, be it a row crop producer. That's going to be the challenge. So.
Although, it's interesting, and I was really wrong on this, but my first job in my career was with Pioneer. And so before the introduction commercially of Roundup Ready beans, so glyphosate-resistant beans, our farmer research department showed projections of how they thought Roundup Ready soybeans would be adopted. And it showed in 6 years or something, becoming like 90% of the market.
Wow.
And I still remember, and probably shouldn't admit this publicly or anything else, but I remember looking at that and saying, related to your issue of adoption, farmers don't adopt anything that fast.
Right.
But they did.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on what it is.
Sure.
Maybe it depends on how compelling the value proposition
Right.
is. But in the
Right.
case of that technology, it just made life so much easier. It saved money from existing methods of weed control that, it went out
Right.
very quickly.
Yeah, well, I hope that the technology adoption it works just the same.
Yeah. So one of the really neat things for the Ag Startup Engine is certainly meeting a lot of the young entrepreneurs that we meet, but it's also some of the more experienced entrepreneurs that we meet, like you. And so as you think about some of the really high impact entrepreneurial people that you've met over the course of your career, and maybe you hold up as somebody that you want to imitate and admire, who are some of those people, and what is it in them that you really admired?
Well, I think the things that I admire in the people that I look back on that have impacted me and that have been entrepreneurs is their drive and their passion. Just truly driven and passionate about their idea, passionate about what they can bring to the market with that idea and how they can impact the future of whatever industry they're trying to impact. So that's what strikes me as the drive and the persistence. Because if you have an idea and you're trying to bring it to market and you're trying to get the product or the service to evolve and to have that adoption, there's some dark days in there, and so I just think that the persistence and the belief in oneself is the biggest characteristic I see is the people that end up being the most successful and the people that survive entrepreneurship. So
because it's hard.
it is hard.
It's probably a chicken or egg question, but when you talk about that persistence, as I think about people that have that characteristic that you're talking about, it's like they, it's one of two things. Either they see a future and they're trying to drive everything around them toward that future, or is it that they're making the future? I don't know if there's much of a difference there, but what do you think? Is it just that they see it and they're compelled to make it, or is it the fact that they know if they don't do it, maybe nobody else does?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a chicken or an egg dilemma. I think about a company that we invested in 2010, and the young entrepreneur at the time said, I'm going to get rid of cash and credit cards, across the globe. And that was just 10 years ago. And that obviously hasn't happened. But again, it goes back to that drive and persistence, because that entrepreneur has pivoted twice and has a very successful company today. And so, you have to recognize that at some point the vision might not be as big and bold as you thought it was going to be, but there is still something there. And so at that point, the egg's laid, the chicken's hatched. Now you just have to try to decide which way the chicken needs to go, right? Cross that road or that road. So,
and you travel to some place like China, and that sort of happened.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
Maybe not quite here in the United States yet.
Not yet. Right. I agree.
But probably getting to that point. Well, you've had a terrific career and been through a lot of things. You started out your career, looking at, gosh, I'm going to go to a hometown bank, and then found out, probably a tough conversation with your dad. Nope, this doesn't work. And so I'm in high school at the same time in college, and remember my dad asking me, hey, do you want to farm?
Yeah.
Which is nice. But I thought, Dad, I'm not saying I don't want to farm, but I think I should go to college.
Right.
Because we were fine, but there's farm sales everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
There's just it's a tough thing.
Where did you grow up?
In Nebraska.
Oh, Nebraska. You told me that.
Yeah. Anyway, you've had a great kind of platform to learn a lot of business lessons. So if you think about what some of those key lessons are in different parts of your career that you draw out as you as an investor and a mentor try to communicate what some of those lessons are, what are some of the important ones?
Well, if you're going to buy a company or start a company, make sure you have enough cash. And make sure you can see where the economy's headed, right? And predict that with 100% accuracy.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good question. Some of the lessons or the advice I would give is surround yourself with really good people, the best people you can find. And don't be afraid to rely on mentors. that was one thing when I owned the company in Hudson called Portavet. I kind of put myself out on an island by myself, small town. Didn't have anybody really in my circle that understood manufacturing and how to make our processes more efficient. I had a little bit of that, but not enough, probably. And so I didn't have enough of the mentor group to help me get through a really hard turn in the economy, and trying to be more efficient in my manufacturing process. So
Do you think that's because you're a little bit independent-minded as part of it, or is it just the isolation of where you were and the fact that there's not an accessible peer group?
Yeah, I would think that. I mean, if you look at this part of the state of Iowa, Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Black Hawk County, there's really only one or two very large employers. One makes green tractors, and there's a great deal of really smart people in that company. But if you don't know who they are and they're not in your mentor network, that all that knowledge is staying inside that company. And so the other's the university. The University of Northern Iowa is at the time was really centered around educating educators or putting out teachers. And so not a lot of manufacturing. There was some manufacturing knowledge there, but I didn't tap into it soon enough. So those are the things I'd say. Surround yourself with really good people. Hire really good people. Have a really strong mentor group. I would say, if you're starting to run low on cash, don't be afraid to exhaust every opportunity to try to find a funding source. Again, I didn't at the time have experience with talking to investors and giving up equity in my company and things like that. So that was a lesson learned as well. So, and those are kind of the lessons I take with entrepreneurs when we talk to these young entrepreneurs today is, and some of the ones that are still around that we've had investment in for 8-10 years, they'll tell us today, hey, I had no idea how tough and how time-consuming raising money is. And that's what you have to be ready for. And if you're going to venture into this entrepreneurial world today, it's a lot of it is you're on the road raising money
and waiting until you really need it.
Yeah,
probably not the best approach.
Well, some people wait too long. Right? As we know, right? You wait too long, and then you're scrambling, and then you're relying on one or two people, and you have to have your network, and the funnel has to be a lot bigger than one or two people.
So when you're sitting in the investor's chair and listening to an entrepreneur pitch, what do you think some of the key things are that at least start to move some of the question marks that you might have coming into meeting somebody new and hearing about a new business to at least trending towards a positive?
Well, the first thing that I like to see is a little bit of gray hair. And what's the average age of a startup entrepreneur these days? You probably know.
Boy,
it's in the 40s. They're in their 40s. I want to say it's 41.
Yeah.
To me, that's okay because that means they've been around the block 2 or 3 times in something, right? And it's more than likely that they've got an idea or a process from where they came from, a better idea or a better process from where they've been or what they were doing before. So they've already got that background, which is good. I have a hard time with somebody that's still in college that stands there and claims to know everything about everything that they're trying to pitch to us, because there's no way that they do. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I give them credit for standing up there in front of a bunch of people with that are investors, and at the same time, they're going to have to surround themselves with some really good people. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does a young entrepreneur, talented though they may be, make up for that deficiency of experience? Is it just about who they surround themselves with and who they consider as part of their team?
Exactly, and that's one of the appealing things to us around the Ag Startup Engine, because we know that you and your circle of people in the incubator, and then as they come through, you've had your eyes on them for a long time. And you are starting to put them with people that can help them. And so that's the appeal to today's world with incubators and accelerators and things like that, is that it's the network that they can build the minute they walk in the door to somewhere like that. And that's what appeals to us. That's why we put our money with funds like yours, like the Ag Startup Engine, and like Next Level Ventures and people like that, is because we know that from the get-go that entrepreneur is going to have a support system and help with reaching out to the people that can be the most helpful to them. So rather than us trying to invest directly on our own without doing the due diligence or having to do the due diligence, we would rather have people like you do that. So
yeah, you give me a flashback to when I started my second company, so I would have been 34. But I'd done one other company and it went well.
Yeah.
But we brought on some outside managers and then it wasn't going to continue growing, so it's sort of like, okay. So anyway, I started another company and went to a prospective investor who just very quickly said, "Oh, you've done it." And at that point, I didn't really feel like I'd done much of anything.
Well,
but I had.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah.
And didn't have the gray hair I do now, but I was starting to get a few.
Right, exactly.
with,
but again,
with good reason.
The first thing that he probably asked is, "How old are you?"
Yeah.
But again, it's you had a process or a better way or an idea that probably came from somewhere else where you were. So that's what we like to see. So I get I get that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, so raising cash can be a significant challenge for entrepreneurs. Are there any stories, Nick, from your own career where there's been a significant challenge for you that you faced, whether it's cash or anything else, where you've had to overcome it? Stories that you can share, and what some of the ways were, methods that you used to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I go back to the company when I owned the manufacturing company, and the fact that with the economy turning, and again, that was a unique situation. It's unlike today. Today the economy's fairly robust. But back in 2007 and 2008 when the economy was turning, if you didn't have deep pockets and a lot of cash, that's where you started getting behind with your suppliers and your vendors and things like that. And so the experience that I had was that I never ran fully out of cash, but it's that you spend so much energy trying to make sure that you don't, that you lose sight of what you're trying to do in the business, on a day-to-day basis. And I was trying to serve the large animal veterinary market, whose business model was shifting overnight because corn was $7 a bushel and gas was $4, diesel was $4 a gallon, and they had just built $1 million veterinary facility, and they decided they weren't going to go out anymore and chase farm animals around the farm. They were going to make the farmer bring it to them. And so, my point is that cash is king, and so how you have to have sight of that when you're the entrepreneur and when you're in the business, and if you don't. If you lose sight of that, and being starting 1 or 2 businesses or 3 or 4, however many, that's where you spend a lot of your energy, is managing cash. And so, if the economy turns and you start getting lower and lower and you start getting extended, just like the farmers do when the commodity prices are low and things like that. I guess that's just my experience. I don't have any other experience other than, running low on cash. It's what it poses to your psyche and to your business and how
it's simple to say, but I think, Nick, you get at a really important issue, that it's not simple to actually execute that. And
Right.
so I try for the classes that I teach to have sort of one simple thing students might actually remember from the class. And so in my small business management class, my 3 rules of small business management are: never run out of cash, never run out of cash, and never run out of cash.
Right.
And the students sort of laugh, like, okay, got it. But I say, we're going to go through some stories over how many creative ways people manage to run out of cash and put themselves in a really bad situation.
Yeah, that's good.
And that there are creative tools, communication being
Right.
one of them, but there are tools for managing more effectively
Yeah,
and preemptively.
The thing I worry about is with today's entrepreneurs, even in Iowa, is that they'll read an article or they'll read some information or they'll see some of the Ag Startup Engine success stories, and they'll say, well, if it was so easy for them, there must be just a bunch of cash out there. And if I can't get it in Iowa, I'll go to the coast, or I'll go to St. Louis. And it's just not that easy. It's just not that easy. It's tough to raise cash, and it's tough to go out to the coast and say, yeah, I'm from Iowa and I have this great idea and I need you to give me $2 million. It just doesn't work that way. It just takes a lot longer, and there's more compelling conversations that need to be had.
So in 1996, when I started my first business, we didn't start looking for money because we made it through revenue to begin with, but we started because things were going well, entertaining the idea of investment capital in probably 1997 sometime. But we had DuPont as a customer, we had revenue. But at that point, the number of people you would talk to in Iowa who were investors in higher risk ventures was pretty small.
Pretty small pool. Yeah.
Mr. Papajohn.
Yeah.
Jude Conway at another fund that he was at back then, but it was pretty small.
Yeah.
Today, and you're helping make this happen, there's a lot more going on, at least. There's more options. So could you comment on how you've seen kind of the environment, even if it's difficult to get money? Iowa and the Midwest, at least, are a better place today than it was 20-some years ago.
Exponentially better.
Yeah.
So, even 10 years ago, it was very difficult, and it was just a couple people that you went to. But as the next level ventures has come around, as the ag startup has come around, Iowa Seed Fund has been in business for longer than both out of Cedar Rapids. There was another couple of smaller funds in Des Moines. The thing is, they're all at different stages. So this might be an early stage fund, and that might be a mid stage fund, and there might be one that's a facility for what do they call it, a lending facility kind of fund, and just different things. So there was one-offs, and it depended on what stage the business was in. Now we're in a lot better shape because there's just a lot more people that have had success now, and they've seen how that works, and the available money for venture is greatly expanded. Still, it doesn't make it easy for the entrepreneur, but there's a lot more people in the room now to hear the story. I mean, I even go back to your event 2 weeks ago. Were we in Ames?
Yeah, about
anyway, the room was full.
Yeah.
Right. And there's only 10 investors in the Ag Startup Engine, right?
Yeah.
But there were 30 or 40 people in the room, and so I didn't even know who all of them were. So I assume many of them had money, right? They were listening to stories. So that,
some wanted money, some wanted to invest.
Yeah. So that's a good feeling to see a room full of people listening to these young entrepreneurs tell their story. Not all of them are young, but and that's a good thing. And we see that not only in ag, but you see it just across everything really right now in Iowa. It's not like Silicon Valley. It's not ever going to be, just because we are a smaller population base. But there was an event in Des Moines called Monetary 3 weeks ago, and there were 25 VCs in town, and only 1 or 2 of them were from Iowa. So that's good to see too. You have people coming from all over the Midwest, 2 or 3 funds from Minneapolis and Ohio and St. Louis and Kansas City, and then there was a few from New York and California. So we're starting to get some attention. It was ironic. One of them is even called Flyover Capital. So, and we used to be, we're considered a flyover state.
Country.
Yeah, we're flyover state or flyover country. So, but the availability is expanded greatly. So that's a good thing to see.
So what's one of the most interesting deals that you've ever made, and why was it interesting?
Well, our first true venture capital investment here we made in 2010, and it's a company based in Des Moines called Dewala. And I tell this story, and if the CEO was sitting here, he would agree. Ben Milne is the entrepreneur, and he's a great guy and a very smart guy, and has done well. And if anyone ever wants a seminar on raising money, Ben should be the lead-off speaker, because he's done it very well. And he's also the one that I said, he's the kind of guy that'll say raising money is a full-time job and it's exhausting. So we were the A round in Dewala. We formed a partnership with the Members Group, which is an Iowa Credit Union League company based in Des Moines, and we each threw in money and then started a different LLC, and that LLC invested in Dewala, and we were the A round. And it was funny when Ben was raising money and telling the story about how his person-to-person money internet business, exchange of money over the internet is basically what it was, without having to use cash or credit cards. In other words, I could if you and I had lunch and we were going to split the tab, I could just send you money over my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was as simple as that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to change the world, and we're going to get rid of cash and cards all over the world. Well, it was funny because we were sitting there in the boardroom, just a few paces from where we're sitting today, and our CEO was 60, a little over 60. The CFO was 50. The COO was 50. The chief administrative officer, she was probably in her 30s, and I was in my 40s. So we're sitting around the table, and it's Ben. And we had decided going into the conversation that Veridian needed to be a part of this movement somehow, some way in technology, and investing in a fintech just to see what was going to happen and be a part of that ecosystem change.
And then you find one based in Iowa.
Then we find one based in Iowa who wants to hang out with a credit union, which was unique. Ironically, no banks would take him. So here we are. Here he is talking to a credit union, and I remember it vividly. Our CEO said, "Gosh, Ben, we just don't get it. We don't understand the concept of people not carrying cash or not carrying a card." And he said, "That doesn't matter if you get it or not. You're not my demographic." there was silence in the room, and everybody kind of looked at each other, and we're like, "Who's the demographic?" He said, "No, I want millennials. I want the 18 to. I'm approaching the 18 to 35 market." Now, mind you, he was asking for money from us to get his company get started, and he told us to our face, "That doesn't matter. You're not my demographic."
Kind of a bracing thing to say.
So we look back and we just laugh about that today. That's one of the most unique things you could say, and the fact that we still invested after that says a lot for Ben. It's a credit to him that he had a compelling story and a unique business idea, and the timing was fabulous, because at the time PayPal was the only game in town. And so great story, and you know, to his credit, he's done a couple pivots, and he's hung in there, and he's raised a lot of money from both coasts and from the Midwest. And
You're invested alongside Andreessen Horowitz.
Well, they were the C round.
Okay.
And Union Square was the B round. So if you look at that cap table and you look at who's in it, the biggest venture capital company in the world, Andreessen Horowitz, is in the cap table. One of the most well-known in the world, Union Square, is in the cap table. There's some famous people in the cap table.
Some actor guy
that's from Iowa, named Ashton something or other. Anyway, there's some really unique people in the cap table, and it's helped us. We've had great learning from being in the boardroom with Union Square and Andreessen Horowitz and people like that, and that's helped us advance our knowledge quickly in the whole venture capital world. And so that's been great fun from that standpoint. But that's one of the most unique things an entrepreneur has ever said to us, especially when he's asking us directly for, "Hey, help me get my company started." Today, we still are investors in Dwolla, obviously, in more ways than one, and we have a very large impact operationally with Dwolla on the back end. So we're helping them move a lot of money through the system, and we've learned a lot through that.
Fantastic.
We've learned a lot around that too, but that was probably the most unique thing, if I had to relive it.
So what lessons do you think we can learn from, you know, the big investment funds like an Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square, or what lessons have you taken? You know, what things, positive or negative, can we bring back to what we're trying to build here in the Midwest?
Well, the things that the first thing I'll say is the entrepreneurs that are starting in Iowa are lucky, because Iowa Nice does exist. And I would find it hard to believe that you're sitting with the entrepreneurs saying some of the things that I've heard in a boardroom from money from the East and West Coast. So that's the first thing. Iowa Nice does exist. But the thing that always impressed me with both Union Square and Andreessen Horowitz from that standpoint, and the really big VC folks, is that the constant focus on the funnel, the sales funnel, and the constant focus of the flywheel, of, you know, keeping prospects in the wheel and keeping the wheel moving, and that process, and how important it is, and how, if any time that flywheel stops, everything else is probably going to stop. And
Okay.
So
the speed and keeping things moving
it just
and being
has
ready to move on.
Right, and it has to be early on. That sales focus is really there. But then secondarily, if it's a tech company, it's the product development of the product and making sure that the minimal viable product is something that makes sense and that somebody's going to buy it. We've been around Paul Singh a little bit, who's a venture capitalist, and he won't invest until they have somebody has a customer.
Okay.
You have to have a customer,
Yeah.
right? You are not investable until you've sold something to somebody's willing to pay you for it. That's the first trigger that says, okay, you might have something here. Somebody's willing to buy it. So, and we're not talking about a friend or a family member that's bought it.
Yeah.
It's got to be a customer.
An actual customer.
So those are the things that have impressed me on the people that do this for a living on a day-to-day basis is that focus. So you're going to have somebody that's been around the block in sales and knows how to tell the story and can get the flywheel going.
Yeah. And so I had Silicon Valley investors in my first company, and I think what I've always taken from there, crazy place, unique place in history, right? But
Yeah.
there's got to be positive lessons we can take. But it's about speed. I think about thinking really big around, big opportunities and being willing just to move on fast and sort of confront things directly. But I do think there's things that we have here in the heartland of America, and part of it is the nice, But
Yeah.
I think part of it too is just I don't know, financial frugality perhaps is part of it, but just I think our entrepreneurs and people here, it isn't that they don't want to be aggressive at putting resources to work, but they're just careful doing it, and sometimes care with
Yeah.
other people's money is a good trait to have.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Some of the things I've seen. So we have a small seed capital fund here in the Cedar Valley that Veridian and myself helped start, and we have 11 investors now in the fund, raised right around $1 million, and
Okay.
and again, we've modeled it after the Ag Startup Engine.
Okay.
So that's flattery to you in
Yeah.
that we've liked what we've seen with what you guys
Mhm.
have built there and how you've done it.
And what's the name of
It's
the fund?
called Red Cedar.
Okay.
Red Cedar Seed Capital Fund.
Mhm.
And so, we're trying to build the ecosystem here now that you're building in Ames and around the university, and it's not easy. And the biggest thing we see is in the early companies that we've seen here in the Cedar Valley is they don't understand what it means to scale.
Mhm.
They don't have the mentality around, in order for those guys to get their money back, I have to build something that's going to scale.
Mhm.
And so that's the thing that we really focus on early, and we're only giving away $25,000 and $50,000 chunks, similar to what you guys are doing at the Ag Startup Engine. And but even so, the question is, how in the world are you going to scale?
Mhm.
Oh gosh, I haven't even thought of that word, or I've thought of that concept. But I said, in order for us to, in order for this to be something that's going to hire people, it's going to employ people, it's going to build we're trying to build companies here.
Mhm.
No different than what we're trying to build in the Ag Startup Engine. Build companies that are going to hire people and employ people in Iowa and help people be more efficient. But you got to scale your company, and you have to find the triggers that are going to allow you to go from here to here to here very quickly.
And it's a good question as to how to instill sort of that push for scale
Right.
into entrepreneurs, and I think, entrepreneurs getting mentored by people like you is certainly a powerful part of it. What we've seen at the Ag Startup Engine, I think, is probably the more powerful part of it, is that when they're entrepreneurs with different companies are hanging out at least occasionally and pushing one another.
Yeah.
And we've had a good bit of that going.
Yes, you have.
Mostly good-natured, but
It
there's
seems-
competitiveness.
Oh, yeah.
But they learn a lot from one another
Yeah, sure.
as well.
You bet. Yeah, I've seen the friendly banter with some of those entrepreneurs, and it appears to be fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the worry is if you don't plant the word scale early on in their process, they would have a tendency to maybe pull back when things get tough, or lay somebody off, or not hire a really top-end business development person
Yeah.
just because I don't quite have enough money, or this and that.
Or
And
just
that's
not recognizing that
Yeah.
some change needs
Yeah.
to happen that's
Yep.
hard.
And a pullback is more, it's more human nature is to pull
Yeah.
back and to
Yeah.
not take the risk and to, that's that balance again between cash and
Mhm.
and pulling the trigger at the right time. And so
Yeah.
it's not a skill, it's an art form. When
Absolutely.
you're starting up and being able to recognize that. Again,
Yeah.
having good people around you can help with that.
Yeah.
So.
So we have a lot of people that watch these videos, Nick.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to ask you, what are some of the most productive ways that you gather insight? Is it meeting other people, going to conferences, books, podcasts, media? What do you enjoy or find the most effective way to gather insights?
Well, I joke with my wife. I use the word networking,
Mhm.
and I'll say I'm going networking. But that gives you an idea to the answer to the way I like to do it. It's through people, other
Mhm.
people. The best compliment I was ever given, it was in my sales career, but I still utilize it today. Somebody once told me, "You ask a lot of questions," and they were kind of telling me I asked too many questions. But first of all, that's what boomers do. I'm a boomer. I'm on the end of the boomer
Generation,
spectrum.
yeah.
And so boomers ask questions like,
Mm.
"Where are you from? Tell me how you got here today," that kind of thing. And it drives Gen X and millennials nuts. I know that. It drives my daughter nuts. But that's how I do it. I just ask a lot of questions, and I just kind of keep it all kind of locked in there somewhere, or stored in there somewhere, and that's how I do it. So I try to be around as many
Mhm.
like-minded people too. So when you provide those networking events at the Ag Startup Engine, after we're standing around talking to people, that to me is the greatest value. Seeing the entrepreneurs, but then being able to talk to them and then talk to the other people and, hey, what'd you think? What'd you see? What didn't you like? Those are the kinds of things that I like to do. So.
I've tried to never forget that when I had sold my second company and started back 10 years ago at Iowa State University, I went to Stanford and was visiting with a professor attached to one of their entrepreneurship programs. And we've taken a lot of inspiration. And again, he's in Silicon Valley. And I asked, what is sort of the key role that Stanford plays in the whole thing here in Silicon Valley? And he looks at me and he thinks for a moment and he says, Kevin, I think really what we do is we have events and conferences where people over coffee or beers break their non-disclosure agreements and come up with the next great ideas, And so I thought, I can do that. I think so sometimes I think whether it's at the Ag Startup Engine or at the Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative, the most constructive use of our resources and time are just putting good people together, different events, the
exactly
ability to
right.
convene.
I agree. That event you throw in the fall with the Ag Entrepreneurial
Unconference.
The Unconference. I get great value from that. Going to the tailgate, the football thing. I get more value out of the tailgating part of it because you meet people you never met, and I didn't know if I would ever get to know anyone at Summit Farms, but today I know 2 or 3 people there, and it's fun to get to know them and hear their perspective on things, because that's a big organization, and that's a worldwide organization now.
It is now.
They're doing some stuff that you're like, wow, that's impressive. To me, that it's the networking. At our seed fund here in the Cedar Valley, we have an executive director, and I keep telling him, your job is to connect the dots from an entrepreneur who has an idea to someone with money to ways to help him understand, the process through maybe you and I. So that's how we view our role, is to connect people and connect what they need at the right time and to connect the dots. And so I view your role probably at Iowa State as very similar to that.
It is.
Connecting people. So.
And it's fun, so I should probably just do more of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'll bet it is fun.
It is fun.
You get to buy the beer.
I do. Most of the time.
Or somebody gets to buy the beer.
So just some quick fire questions to end here. What's your earliest memory of agriculture?
My grandfather's.
Okay.
Yeah, you bet.
So getting to work alongside your
yeah,
grandfathers.
my paternal grandfather did the horse and plow thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Mine the same. And so
Yeah.
my dad's dad, Martin Kimle, had these wonderful horse and man stories.
Yeah.
And of course, you only tell the good ones, I suppose. But we used to laugh. But
Yeah.
then my dad would lean over and say, Kevin, I love your grandfather's horse stories, but I'm glad we farm with tractors. I took his word for that.
Exactly. But even my granddad's earliest tractors, some of them are sitting right here in front of us. These are prototype, or these are actual some of the things that our granddads owned and
Yeah.
used. So
Yeah. Do you remember the first money that you made?
paper route,
Okay.
delivered newspapers. Yeah.
Taking care of the town of Hudson?
Taking care of it. Yeah. Back in those days, not only did we deliver, but we had to collect.
Yes.
And so had to knock on the doors.
Well, you had to be keeping them happy.
Yep,
Otherwise, you
so-
got customer feedback.
That's right. That was my earliest money, the paper route.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, who have been some of the most influential people in your career?
Oh, great question. Actually, they're deceased. Both of the people that I call my truest mentors, my early mentors, are no longer with us. But one was a super driven, super power charged sales guy. That's where I learned the word drive.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really good at instilling that in others and training that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's from within. You have to have the drive from within,
Mhm.
but also you have to harness it and know how to use it. And so he was great at that. The other one was just a really smart guy that had the ability to look and see project into the future in an uncanny way.
Mhm.
You'd think, no way is that going to happen, And 2 years later, there it was.
How do you think he did that?
I don't know. He was just gifted in some way. He was really bright guy and a mathematician, and into computers before anybody else was into computers, and just had that special part of his brain that worked differently than others. But he also was a teacher, so he also tried to impart that in many people, and that's why I liked him so much and how he was helpful to me.
So just on the way up here, I was listening to the end of an audiobook about the dawn of electricity. And so one of the major characters in there, other than Thomas Edison, is George Westinghouse, who I didn't know much about.
Oh.
But his unique characteristic was that future focus.
Yeah.
And not only being able to envision it, but make it happen. And they were talking just about, quoting some of his friends and about it, and he just refused to look backward.
Yeah, good.
And which is a tough thing, especially
Mhm.
when things go badly.
Sure.
It's hard to, but he would just get past them and
Yeah.
try to learn from them, of course. But just, part of, I think, his future focus was, trying to realize that learn from the past, but don't dwell on it.
You're right, exactly.
And push forward.
Yeah.
So maybe that kind of future focus and the drive thing that you talked about, those two things might really come together.
Well, the two people that I have in mind, that I'm thinking about today, both embellished that, or that was part of their DNA.
Mhm.
So.
Well, last question. So we're an agriculture investment fund, but the good news at the end of our industry is always that it's food.
Yeah, there's
which is good. So what's your favorite meal or food experience?
Oh gosh, my most favorite food experience. I ate ostrich a few years ago on the island of St. Martin.
Okay.
Yes. So I don't think we're serving that too much in the United States yet.
Not very often.
Right.
There was some experiment some years ago, but I don't think it got very
Yeah,
big.
so, I could
Was
say,
it the St. Martin part or the ostrich part, or
well,
just the combination
maybe
of the two?
it was the combination of the two. I was in a tropical island eating something I probably wouldn't eat at home. So
Okay.
that's my best memory of a food experience.
Yeah.
So
Well, thanks for your time today, Nick.
Yeah.
Thanks for supporting the Ag Startup Engine, and thanks for doing what you do here in Iowa and Cedar Valley as
yeah.
well.
And we appreciate what you're doing for ag tech and the Ag Startup Engine in central Iowa. So keep up the good work.
All right, will do.